What is happening in Ethiopia?
To possible war crimes in Ethiopia.
Thousands of people have been killed in the year-long conflict.
Abiy Ahmed's words come on the first anniversary of the internal conflict with the Tigray rebels.
Is this the Ethiopian civil war entering a new phase?
This is not the imposition of sanctions, but another threat of sanctions.
If the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
We begin in Ethiopia, where the government says its forces have retaken a city in southern Tigray.
The TPLF says it will withdraw from several regions it had captured in the last few months.
They are now the closest to the lifeline that links Addis Ababa and Ethiopia in general.
The World Food Programme has halted food distribution in the Ethiopian towns of Kombolcha and Dessie.
The organization, the coordination, the wickedness, and the overwhelming power that were fully employed by the West to subjugate Ethiopia were nothing short of tantamount to a full-scale invasion by a conventional war. The same was done against Ethiopia 120 years ago. Only then the colonial invader was one Western country. This time, it was governments and media from countries of almost the entire Western Hemisphere. Some more adamant, more grateful, and more malicious than the others, maybe, but all paraded in a devilish unison and with the fullest of force to break the spirit of the oldest independent nation in Africa, indeed, among the very few in the world. In the last colonial military invasion brutally waged against it by the Western country over a century ago, Ethiopia won, unquestionably. In the recent egregious psychological warfare mercilessly waged against it by the entire West, Ethiopia won, also unquestionably. In both, the country's victory came out against all possible odds and beyond the wildest imagination of the aggressors. The first one was a hot war of subjugation in Adwa in 1888, and Ethiopia crushed it. The second was a cold war of PSYOP in Addis Ababa in 2021, and Ethiopia crushed it. In both, the wins were not only unequivocal, but also spectacular. When assessed in retrospect, the succession of events in the operation of the coordinated psychological warfare waged against Ethiopia was nothing short of breathtakingly mesmerizing. These are just the major few. First came part one of the two-part theater of genocide narrative aptly acted by CNN, fabricating stories of genocide with stories and choreographed footage of riverbank full of dead bodies. Then came relentless organized pursuit of blemish and squeeze against the Ethiopian government with allegations of deliberately denying aid to the people of Tigray, in whose name a few old guard communist diehards engage in a terrorist battle against the will of the people. In an incredibly senseless assertion that sounded like a childish folly, a Western media reported to the world, Ethiopian Prime Minister signals that he intends to block food aid to the country and starve the people. That absurdly twisted description was in reporting a remark by Ethiopia's Prime Minister in which he said Ethiopians must work very hard to eradicate dependency on foreign aid. Then came the whispers of the doomsday scenario among the diplomatic circles about Addis Ababa falling into chaos and anarchy, with no practically credible happenings taking place on the ground for making that kind of assertion. Then after came cascades of evacuation advisories for foreign nationals to immediately leave Addis Ababa, first voluntarily, then by offering crisis allowance packages to entice them to evacuate, and a few days later, forcibly by putting their employment in question unless they evacuate. Then came closing of all international schools in the city, not only forcing expatriate school staff to immediately leave by threatening them to lose their jobs otherwise, but also by gathering students in halls and officially telling them the city is going to be on fire soon. That was when all other schools in the city remained open and over 380,000 students kept going to their classes every day. Then came the infamous lunacy by CNN breaking news about Addis Ababa falling into rebel militants that was broadcasted with a fake photo of soldiers at the gates of the capital city. That ignominious fakery by CNN goes down in history as the most disgraceful journalistic hooliganism ever committed by a large media conglomerate in recent memory. Then came the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration warning civilian pilots that the rebel militants possess enough firepower to shoot down passenger aircrafts off the Addis Ababa skies. That was when everyone wondered what business was it for the U.S. agency to issue such a warning about an airspace no American airline flies to, not to mention what would such warning be of use to civilian pilots, and if there was an aircraft maneuver that civilian pilots are trained for to evade missiles in midair. And that was when many people questioned why the U.S. would choose to warn civilian pilots about militants' firepower to explode planes by missiles, but not the terrorist militants themselves from attempting such blatantly terrorist act. Planes kept flying, landing and taking off nonetheless. Then came the news of the U.S. Embassy shredding documents in their offices and removing hard drives from all embassy computers, loading them and taking them out. That was when the U.S. flag kept flying at full grace. The embassy compounds remained, or looked from the outside, as calm as they have always been. Then after came another warning by the U.S. Embassy issuing about possible terrorist explosions and advising citizens to avoid malls or public areas, and also to stock emergency supplies for when the city erupts into mayhem and lawlessness. Yet the situation in Addis was nothing but normal. Electricity kept on, water flew, internet connection remained intact 24/7, there was no shortage of power, water, medicine, fuel, no signs of mass hysteria like snaky queues or panic stampedes, food markets going empty or terrorist bombs exploding, or mass looting and destruction, no debilitating economic collapse, no hyperinflation. All these doomsday portents were all the more rampant only just few weeks ago. Today, life goes on in Addis Ababa as it always has. Schools are open as they always were. Students attend classes as they always have. Banks are open, governments and private offices are working as they always did. Markets are full, fuel, water, medicine, electricity, internet, all utilities keep running uninterrupted as they always did. Citizens of Addis Ababa remain calm and collected as they always have been. The metropolis keeps its brightness. People stroll on, cars fill up the quiet and peaceful streets in Addis Ababa. It was all like that during the time those scary predictions of Omen were persistently propagated. It has been, and it is all like it is now. Western governments invaded Ethiopia in an invisible artillery of falsehoods and psyop that, if it had come true, could have resulted in an unimaginable catastrophe of biblical proportions. Against all odds, the evil wishes of the Western media and governments, life kept on. Ethiopia won. They lost. Spectacularly then in Adwa, and now spectacularly in Addis Ababa. Ethiopia prevailed. In a spectacle that would seem like a celebratory gathering to hail victory of continental prominence equivalent to that of the victory of Adwa, Ethiopians living around the planet began flying to Addis Ababa in throngs. Entire incoming flights to the city are fully booked out. The passenger terminals are bustling with arriving crowds to an almost overcapacity. The roaring noises of the engines of the plane landing in and taking off from Addis Ababa airport are filling the Addis air. The tarmacs are full of airplanes taxiing in and out. The festivity of the mood in the air is unmissable. And this is a city whose skies only a few weeks ago were deceptively mislabeled by the US as dangerous for civilian aircrafts to fly on, due to militants allegedly possessing power to blow a plane full of passengers. The win in Addis Ababa is a magnificent parallel to the win in Adwa. The aggression in Adwa by a European colonizer and Ethiopia's victory over it inspired the resilience and independence struggles by Africans and the entire black peoples around the globe. The latest psyop aggression on Addis Ababa by neo-colonialist mindsets rallied Africans and black people around the globe who awakened the world that Ethiopia was indeed fighting an African war. Ethiopia in Africa scored a victory that is resonating across the continent and beyond, resulting in reverberating the sentiments of freedom, anti-colonialism, Against all earthly odds and in unlikeliest of scenarios, together we won then. Quite in a similar manner, together we won now. There is no turning back.